the 23rd of May 1943, mid-Atlantic, 200 miles southwest of the Azores. The night is a cold, tar-black dome. Wind shears across the small flight deck of USS Bogue, CVE-9, as a TBM Avenger shudders to life radome bulging beneath its belly, bomb bays slung with depth charges, crew sealed behind fogging goggles and rubber masks. Below, escorting destroyers and the new destroyer escorts stitch a restless ring of white wake around the baby carrier. On the bridge, a bosun's pipe shrills, red lights glow on charts, and somewhere inside the hull, a radio operator bends toward a glowing dial as a needle jerks on the HF divided by DF set. They called them Jeep carriers with a sailor's fondness and a U-boat captain's scorn. Kinderwagen, one German petty officer had said with a grin in breast baby carriages. Easy prey. Too slow, too short a deck, too few planes to matter in mid-ocean. That laughter still hangs in Kapitän Leutnant Ernst Weber's mind as his Type VIII knife silently between swells, decks awash, diesel smell trapped in the metal lungs of the boat. He has ridden a Wolfpack before 6 boats, 15, sometimes 20 converging on the fat scribbles of a convoy's wake. Out here, in the air gap, daylight once belonged to him. On Bogue, the HF divided by DF operator raises a hand. Bearings shift 390 again. The words crackle to Combat Information Center, to the captain, to the flight deck where the Avenger's wings lock in a clap and the deck crews crouch in the prop wash. CIC has the new rhythm of the hunt, a single impulsive enemy radio burst to BDU. For weather or to a scatter of U-boats for a rendezvous is enough for Huff Duff to point a finger through the dark. SG radar turns its 10-centimeter beam. Scopes, whisper, contacts, and ghosts. The bridge orders a turn. Destroyers rev and heel over. Sonars lowering into the froth. Launch! The Avenger leaps down the short track, its wheels skipping once before biting air. The pilot lieutenant, J.G. Tom Halley to his crew, Hal, on the chalkboard, checks his magnetic compass and rides the vector the signalman stabbed onto a grease pencil plot. Cut the bearing, quarter the circle, force the U-boat to choose ascend, submerge, and lose speed, or stay up and die in the beam. In the belly, the radio man slides the headset down, tuning the ASV radar, watching the blips materialize like bats. The turret gunner stares into a hole of wind and stars, trying not to think of tracer lines in the cold that lives in the ocean. Below that ocean, Weber has already made his choice. He swore at the repaired radar detector that never quite catches the American sets, and he hates the way the sea tells him when to be brave and when to be blind. Alarm! The watch tumbles through the conning tower hatch. The plane guard slams the breech of the 20mm. The helmsman heel over straightens his shoulders as the boat slides under, bow first, like a seal. Ballast tanks burp, gauges swing, the U-boat goes gray, green, then black, and the world becomes the breathing of the boat and the soft pings that creep through steel. On the surface again, Bogue's escorts close the datum, the imaginary X where the U-boat dove, adjusted by drift and arrogance. A Buckley-class destroyer escort knifes through the sea, Hedgehog rails armed, projector spigots bristling like a porcupine on the forecastle. In sonar control, a young lieutenant, hands steady on the range rate, sings depth and bearing in a cadence that fits the role of the ship. The captain watches his stopwatch and the turning circle on the plot, while the helmsman bites through the sea, the bow pushing green water aside like hay. The Avenger finds it first. Contact short, fast return, Hal says, voice even. He banks, feeling the aircraft become a long arm reaching for a pulse in the water. No lee light here, this isn't Coastal Command, but the scope and the mind's map are enough. He crowds the throttle, calls his run, and the crew works like a single muscle. Bomb bay doors yawn, fuses checked, safety wires gone. The ocean below is a blank until a fleeting silver track wake to wake betrays a swirl. Hal puts the invisible boat under his nose and curses the way the stars do not hold still. Weber feels the first pattern only as a change in pressure, and then the pressure becomes sound, and then the sound becomes impact heavy, concussions that slap the hull and shower rust like red rain. Nothing breaks, not this time. Hold depth, he says, calm through clenched teeth, because his men need to borrow his calm the way they borrow each other's cigarettes in the dead hours. He thinks, briefly, of the joking breast and wonders who will be laughing if he surfaces into guns. The destroyer escort crosses the datum and spits a hedgehog pattern. Unlike depth charges, Hedgehog bombs will only detonate on contact, no rending roar, unless steel actually meets steel. The bridge crew hears nothing but wind, and then, far astern, a muffled, separate pop that is not the sea. Possible hit. The ship wheels for another run. Sonar rides the echo like a hound. In the Avenger, Hal banks again for a second pass, and for a moment, just a moment, he sees it. Not the boat itself, but a short boil of oil, where no ocean should boil. Bogue's captain leans to the voice tube. "Keep him down," he says, and the order rolls outward. More patterns, tighter circles. Keep the pressure on until the batteries die and the air is a poison. Out beyond the escort's wakes, the night seems larger for the little carrier's insistence. She is not a fleet carrier, no. Her deck is short, her island modest, her complement small. But she does not need a fleet's grandeur for this work. She only needs to be here in the gap the U-boats once owned, sending planes in wake and steel and patience into the dark. On the U-boat, Weber's helmsman wipes his sleeve across a bead of water that will not fall from the gauge. The smell is battery acid and sweat and hope going stale. Somewhere in the frames, a rivet sings. The sounder ticks. The petty officer on the hydrophones cups his hands as if he could warm the ocean with them and whispers, "Screws, zigging." The captain touches the chart with 2 fingers. "We wait," he says. "Then we rise fast. Then we run." He does not say that every minute makes fast a smaller word. Above, Hal calls his second run. The second run is flown like a ritual learned at speed. Hal trims the Avenger nose low and rides the trembling line of the scope. On top, now, doors gape. Depth charges drop in a measured clatter and vanish into black silk. A breath. Then the sea rears, white and green, lifting a fist where the pattern walk meets the hidden hull. The blast slams the aircraft and rattles the gunner's teeth. On the destroyer escort, men feel it in their boots through the deck, a distant thud that seems to sigh up through the steel. Below, Weber's world turns to dust and pain. The lights cough, flicker to red, a gasket spits. One battery cell cracks with a noise like breaking ice, and the air snatches at lungs, thin with chlorine bite. Blow negative, hold her. The helmsman eases her with fingertips, a blind man's piano. The boat groans, wanting to broach. The planes bite and hold. The trim is a decision made over and over again. Someone whispers a prayer into a sleeve. Above the hum of the E-motors, the hydrophone operator flinches screws, fast, then slower, then gone, then fast on another bearing. The enemy is circling with a compass the U-boat cannot see. On the escort's bridge, the captain reads the sea. Come left 10. Hedgehog, ready fire as you bear. Sonar sings ranges that rise and fall like a stubborn heartbeat. The ship bucks into a short sea, sprays sheet over the bow. The forecastle team clings to lifelines as if gripping the throat of a thing they cannot name. Fire! The Hedgehog spigots spit their 24 bomblets into a curved constellation. Silence again, 10 seconds, 12, then 3 quick impacts, each a popping thump, separate, intimate, like knuckles rapping wood in a room you thought was empty. A cheer tries to claw up and is strangled into business. Mark datum, come around, keep him down. Hal calls fuel, checks his time on station, and looks at a sea now smudged by a film of something glistening. He thumbs the mic. Oil patch, possible debris, request another pass. Permission comes clipped and practical. The Avenger flattens, low enough that the ocean seems to rise to meet its belly. The gunner swears soft, reverent, there. The periscope feather breaks surface, instant and gone. Hal drops a marker flare. Its small, stubborn flame sputters and steadies, a nail hammered into the night. He banks hard, feeling the wingtip tug like a leash. Weber watches the needle slide toward empty. Batteries 30%, his engineer says, eyes raw. The air gauge tells an older truth. 20 men have breathed the same hope for too long. Surface then, the captain says, voice iron flat. Full ahead on the diesels. Argue with them. The boat rises through depth marks as if waking from surgery. Each number a choice. The tower breaks water cold, green, angry. The bridge hatch thumps open, salt air slaps faces. Man the gun! Diesel smoke coughs like an old man, and then steadies into a roar. The boat surges. The destroyer escort has been waiting for that sin. Target up! The 3-inch opens at once, the first round short and bracketed, then walking in with the certainty of training that finally found its war. Tracers from 20 millimeters and 50 seconds stitch the conning tower in hot, straight lines. The U-boat's 20 millimeters chokes, jams, is cleared, barks once, twice, and then disappears in splinters. Men buckle, vanish. Weber stands in the slit of the tower, hat gone, hair salt wet, shouting orders no one can hear. He sees, in the strobing confusion of gunfire and spray, something he has not seen in months. A small carrier silhouette shouldering the horizon, implacable, sending out another aircraft into the dark as if the night were just another shift on the line. Hal rolls in, this time with rockets slung under the Avenger's wings, stubby barn doors of violence that the crew had grumbled about loading for sub work. He leads them a little and looses. The first pair smash the deck aft of the tower. The second pair walk forward. One blows up just short, jawing a trough that swallows 3 men and spits back a ladder. The downwash drive sprays sideways. The flare hisses and goes out. Hal drags the throttles. The radioman hears Bogue's calm call, "Well done," clear to return, and swallows the taste of copper in his mouth. The U-boat stops being a hunter and becomes an object. The destroyer escort closes and rakes. The 3-inch throws a shell into the foredeck that lifts it like torn paper. A white-shaped surrender cloth goes up from the tower and snaps, then is shot away and reappears, stubborn. A hand waving from a sinking room. The captain on the escort's bridge hesitates less than half a breath. Sees fire range check, prepare to take prisoners. Boats ready, watch for scuttling. A final depth charge, set shallow, kicks beneath the stern to spoil a last dive. The U-boat lists, slows, shudders. Men boil out of hatches, some leaping clear into the black that smells suddenly of diesel and iron. Weber stands last. He has a pocket watch he cannot read because the night has no numbers left. Abandoned, he says, not to be heard, but because a captain owes words to the sea. He steps into the dark and is, for a second, just another swimmer on a surface that wants everyone equally. Dawn bruises the horizon in weak peach. The baby carrier is a low, practical outline against the new sky. On Bogue's deck, the first crew of the day is already checking a TBM's racks, hands moving in the muscle memory that Triumph breeds. On the destroyer escort, sailors haul men in, handing blankets, cigarettes, hot coffee in steel mugs that burn numb fingers back to life. The prisoners' faces are gray, blank, then human. One young seaman, twin to any other in any other navy, stares at the small carrier and breathes a single word in a language everyone understands when it is said like this. Unglaublich. Across the ocean, in a silent bunker where the clocks have all agreed to be unkind, Gross Admiral Karl Dönitz reads the night's signals. Tonnage sunk down, boats lost up, bearings lost in the static of radar, air, and the uncooperative stars. He has already moved Wolfpacks farther west and south. He has already demanded countermeasures, new tactics, better detectors, but the tally on the blotter is not a tactic. It is a weather report, and weather is what a sailor believes. On the 24th of May 1943, the order goes out to pull the U-boats from the North Atlantic convoy lanes. Black May, the Allied press will call it. In the here and now, under red lights and concrete, it is just a pencil lifted from a map. June 1943. Mid-Atlantic, the old air gap now crowded by new intentions. USS Card, CVE-11, runs upwind under a low ceiling, green water thudding the bow as if insisting she turn back. She does not. Her escorts thin hold and eager range out like sheepdogs on a wet field. In the dim of Card's CIC, a chalk circle marks bearings that never quite sit still. A petty officer cranks the HF divided by DF loop, the needle dancing. The talker's voice stays level because level voices keep small ships from becoming small tragedies. Short burst on 8250, bearing 210, fading. Launch the Avenger, Card's captain says, and it's said like a habit, not a flourish. On deck, crewmen heave at chocks. The TBM trembles, its belly now armed with something new. Mark 24 acoustic torpedo, the crew calling it Fido, a torpedo that listens. Under the wings, depth charges and rockets, because not every problem is solved with a single cleverness. The pilot, Lieutenant Frank Miner, to the log checks masthead lights wreathed in mist and nods once to his men. The catapult isn't needed on a jeep. just wind and will. He takes both. Below, Captain Lieutenant Weber rides a different wind, the metallic rush of air skimming along a pressure hull. His boat has survived Black May's harvest, shaken and spared. He has changed frequencies, shortened transmissions, drilled silent running until silence seems louder than sound. On the chart are dots, refuelers, Milchkua, the big Type 14s that keep wolves fed. Rendezvous points now shifted absurd distances by signals that never come in clear. We are shadows, he tells his watch, and hates how the sea hears lies. Miner's Avenger stoops out of the cloud and becomes a new sort of bird. ASV radar washes the skin of the water and returns with a quiver something, small and quick. The radio man listens to the scope's whisper, feels the way the set warms the bones of his face. Blip at 1 to 4 miles, starboard 10. The turret gunner breathes through the mask, eyes wet, not from fear but from cold that creeps in and sits. Copy, Miner says. He pushes throttle, trims, and the aircraft answers like a partner who doesn't ask questions. Card's group swings on the datum, escorts widening, then knitting tight. Sonar operators murmur bearings, changes in screw beat, reverent as choir boys. A Buckley-class spools her Hedgehog, the spigots pointed like fingers. Hold your water, her captain says, and the helmsman grins because he's never heard the old phrase sound so literal. Bogue's success a month earlier has become a lesson plan. Card is the next class. Weber surfaces into gruel-colored daylight, miles from where the pencil on his chart believes him to be. He needs air, he needs speed, and he needs a horizon that holds no silhouettes. Bridge clear. The conning tower blooms into rain and wind. The diesel coughs awake and shoves the boat forward. The lookout wipes water off his lids and freezes. Mass bearing 315. Not a convoy. Worse. A small carrier and the wolves that hunt wolves. Alarm? Weber feels the deck drop under his feet, the tower filling with slaps of water. The hatch clangs. The ladder spills men downward. The boat angles and slides into green. He holds his breath longer than prudence requires, because air on the way down tastes like reprieve. Silent, he says, palm open, as if quiet were a thing he could give them. Miner flies the pattern he drew in nerves before he drew it on paper. No Lee light here. The Americans carry flares and radar, and a new patience. He drops a float, then a small star that turns into a wavering, arrogant flame. Sonobuoys, his radio man says, half question. Miner nods and they kick 3 overboard. The headset fills with distant, salt-eaten heartbeats, propellers maybe, wave slap definitely, the sea itself humming nonsense. He hates and loves the new trick in equal measure. The Mark 24 waits in the bay like a held breath. The Buckley takes first crack. Hedgehog fire. 24 bomblets leave the folks on the same somehow old-fashioned grace they always have, arcs through gray air that end in nothing. No detonation. Which, perversely, is good. A miss is quiet. Quiet keeps the target ignorant. Come left. Regain contact. Sonar hums, loses, regains. The escort captain drums 2 fingers on the rail and does not look aft at the carrier because Card's presence is a promise, not a comfort. Promises are kept forward. Weber's engineer taps the battery dial like a doctor coaxing a pulse. 48%. The air has already thickened. Men roll it through their lungs like bad grappa. The hydrophone operator lifts a hand. Something new, he says, and does not have a name for the distant bounce of propellers above. The captain closes his eyes 1 second and opens them because command does not blink. Hold her at 70 meters. We ride the wake of their curiosity. Miner arms the Mark 24. He lines up the run as if setting a table, steady and fussy. The torpedo drops and becomes, in 3 rope seconds, a thing alive, a seeker. He turns away, climbs into the wool of cloud, and becomes a listener. The radio man cups the earphones, nods, and swallows. You could believe you hear it, the steady, patient buzz as the little fish follows heavier screws down the slope of silence. Weber hears it, or thinks he does. A new noise, drawn and fox-smart, slipping around the boat's own footprints. Hard over decoy. The helmsman throws the wheel. The coxswain slaps the lever. A canister coughs. A cloud of chemical falsehood flowers aft. The boat side slips, protests, finds another track in the dark. For 3 heartbeats, the captain smiles. Then the smile dies. The sound remains. Not fooled. Up planes 5 meters. Increase speed. The words are treason to silent and salvation to alive. On the escort, sonar notes a spike of agitation. Target accelerating. The Buckley's captain smells desperation like ozone before lightning. Ready charges shallow. If he pops, we spoil it. He doesn't have to. The ocean ahead of his bow lifts as if startled. The torpedo finds the boat, chooses still over decoy, and kisses. The concussion is round and final. Air bruises out of the water and fat bubbles. Diesel slick climbs like regret. Debris, Miner's gunner says. A rag of gray paint, a toolbox, the impossible relic of a boot. The crew does not cheer. You do the job, you mark the position, you call in boats. The Avenger circles, protective and small, until fuel and duty argue in the cockpit and duty wins. Time to go home. Card eases around the site while boats drag men out of a sea that pretends indifference. A prisoner coughs, foam, and tries to salute, and someone pushes his hand down gently. On the carrier, the deck gang chalks a new kill, marked small, neat, as if modesty were part of the ordinance. In radio, an encrypted vector arrives that sends the group further out. Intelligence distilled from fingers that never touch salt water, pointing to a refueler due tomorrow. The captain traces the line, then looks at the sea. We'll be there first. That night, Weber's name is not written in any log, because his log sank with him. The men who pulled his sailors from the water do not know which captain's will they unstitched from steel. They know only that the gap no longer belongs to the wolves. It belongs to small decks, long patience, and machines that listen. June 1943. The ocean wears a lid of pewter cloud, the horizon a ruler line. Card holds station upwind while her escorts sweep in scissor patterns. Radios kept on short leashes, men on shorter sleep. In CIC, the hunter-killer doctrine feels like choreography. HF divided by DF needles point. SG radar confirms. Sonobuoys listen, and the little carrier pushes her influence outward like a tide. A fresh vector rides in on encrypted circuits from stateside 10th Fleet's plotting rooms, new and hungry, have triangulated a refueling rendezvous in the mid-Atlantic. If Wolfpacks are wolves, the Type 14 tankers are their ribs. Break ribs, collapse the chest. On the hangar deck, ordnance men roll a Mark 24 Fido under an Avenger's belly with the care you'd give a sleeping child. The pilot Miner again, cap pulled, low walks the line with his crew chief. Depth charges fused, shallow, rockets shouldered into rails, torpedo safety pinned. He rests his hand a second on the metal flank, not for luck, but for connection. We're not chasing, he tells the radio man. We're cutting a throat. The words are quiet and without drama, and that is precisely why they hold. Far out and downwind, a fat, blunt-bowed U-boat rides, high, no deck gun, generous casing, the odd proportions of a specialist. Inside, Capitan Lieutenant Brandt listens to weather reports crackling into Medocs, skims a signal from a commander he has never met, and sketches a rendezvous time with a pencil that dances to the swell. His Type 14 is a barn in a world of skiffs, but the wolves depend on him. Fuel, food, spare torpedoes, even doctors and mail if luck runs with the current. He knows he is not a hunter, he is a target that moves. He also knows the ocean used to be big enough for targets to hide. Card turns to put wind across her deck, and the Avenger thunders forward, nose lifting, wings shivering into purpose. In the back, the turret gunner tightens his straps and thinks about coffee cooling somewhere he cannot reach. Scope warming, the radio man says, and the phrase has become a prayer. Up front, Miner sets a search box by the numbers and then lets instinct smear the corners. They fly the grid moves, they move with it. The first clue is not radar, not yet. It is smell, a faint line of diesel on a wind that carries yesterday's stories. Oil trace, the gunner mutters, more to himself than the intercom. A minute later, ASV draws a fingertip on the scope. The return is larger than a Type VII, steadier, as if the ocean is trying to balance something too wide on its palm. Miner checks bearing, pings Card with a clipped contact report, and begins the work. Below, Brandt has planned to keep his boat on the surface. The Type 14 swims poorly underwater, slow to submerge, quick to tire. He trusts lookouts and the Bay of Biscay lessons. Fly in pairs, fight off the plane if you must, get under cloud. But this is no bay, and the cloud is not a roof. It is a filter that turns aircraft into ghosts. All hands, he says. Shore stop. We fuel fast or not at all. Hatches bang. Men move with the practiced speed of those who have rehearsed bad outcomes. On Card's nearest escort, sonar wakes from its own gray dream. Possible second contact, broad bearing to the south. A submarine approaching the tanker for its drink. The captain's jaw sets. Two objectives make for messy decisions. He chooses the greater prey. Card actual, this is Foxtrot. We commit on the large contact. Recommend air watch for the second. A beat. Approved comes back, as if the sea had handed permission along with the swell. Minor drops sonobuoys. Plops spaced like beads on a string. The headphones fill with overlapping familiar nonsense until one thread becomes distinct, the throaty churn of machinery pushing too much water. He sets the run not directly at the contact but across its path, the way you would cast a net. The Mark 24 hangs one heartbeat longer under the Avenger than any of them like. Now, the torpedo vanishes. The airplane lifts into the wool. Brant hears the call he dreads. Flugzeug. Then the second, Unbekanntes Geräusch achtern. The ocean has new fauna. He orders, turns, throws a decoy, pictures false screws blooming astern in a cloud of chemistry and hope. But the tanker's engines are a metronome. You cannot whisper with a voice that big. He feels, through deck plates and an old sailor's bones, the moment the sea decides. The torpedo that listens chooses the only song worth following. On the surface, the explosion is almost polite. No towering geyser, just a degrading motion. The great hull hitching. The deck stepping down a staircase that is not there. Air boils up in quilts. The bow tries to lift and cannot. The tanker begins to roll as if considering a thought too heavy to hold. Hit, Miner says, flat. He does not watch for men. Not yet. He banks for a second pass, should the ocean be persuaded to change its mind. The escort knifes in, Hedgehog silent, charges held, guns idle. There is no point in breaking what gravity and pressure are already claiming. Boats swing out, lines are flaked. Hands hard with salt and rope reach for enemies whose only job now is to breathe. In the mess later, someone will say it. Kill the cows and the wolves starve. No one will feel clever saying it. The second contact, a leaner, faster shape, catches only the aftermath. Her captain arrives to a field of oil and a dotting of heads and orders the only order left. Tauchen, weg, submerge, away. He leaves men in the water because every second he does not leave increases the number of men who will join them. The sea has always demanded arithmetic. 1,943 simply changed the numbers. Night comes on with an old Atlantic meanness. Card steams with screens tight and eyes wider. In radio, 10th Fleet passes another guess made of mathematics and shadows. In CIC, chalk arcs bend and are wiped away by hands that no longer shake. On the flight deck, the ordnance crew pushes a new Fido into place and murmurs to each other not about killing but about procedure. Pin here, safety there, checklist complete. Rituals save lives. Sometimes they take them. Tonight, they save the hands that perform them. Brant's survivors, wrapped in navy blue blankets, sit under a strip of sky and watch the baby carrier shear the tops off small waves with her bow. No one laughs. One of them touches the deck with bare fingers, surprised at the warmth stored in painted steel. He looks up when Wildcat fighters taxi by squat, practical things with wings that seem barely enough, and you can see the thought cross his face. The boats were not beaten by a weapon alone. They were beaten by a system that arrived at last where no system had been. On Carr's bridge, the captain writes the coordinates with a pencil, and then, because it is late and men are fallible, writes them again slower. In the log, he notes the time, the sea state, the ordnance expended and remaining. He closes the book, lifts glasses to the dark, and sees nothing but the work ahead. The ocean is big again, and now it is theirs to cross. July, October 1943. Washington, D.C. A windowless room where coffee tastes of pencils and decisions. On a wall-sized Atlantic, grease pencil arcs bloom and vanish as if the ocean were a living graph. The men of the newly stood up 10th Fleet intelligence hands, HF divided by DF coordinators, weather guessers whom time will call meteorologists, turn fragments into vectors. One short, careless U-boat burst on the wrong wavelength, one bearing snagged by a corvette's loop antenna, one convoy commodore's terse sighting, and a hunter killer group is vectored like a blade. The admiral signs with a blunt initial. Signal sprint outward Norfolk to Argentia, to the Azores agreement just inked, to little carriers pacing the wind in gray latitudes. At sea, Card wears the summer like a wet coat. Her CIC adds a new layer to its ritual, Sonobuoy patterns practiced on empty water until the operators can pick a submarine out of whale song and wave slat. On the hangar deck, a chalk scrawl on a bulkhead reads, "Plan the hunt or the hunt plans you," and no one admits to writing it. VC-9's pilots smoke less and checklist more because survival has turned out to be the reward for procedure. The ocean answers with its oldest trick, fog. It folds down over the mid-Atlantic in July and lingers into August like a stubborn guest. The planes fly anyway, instruments sweating, radar scopes warm before hands. One morning, a Wildcat nearly taxis into nothing at the bow, and the deck crew hauls the pilot back with hands on his wingtips, laughter loud because relief needs a mask. The next night, a TBM returns on fumes and lands diagonal. Hook missing the last wire by a cigarette, the crew's faces chalk white, lit by wands in the guilty joy of the living. Down under that lid of weather, a Type VII slides from a rendezvous where everything felt wrong. The refueler late, the sea too quiet, the air a little crowded. Captain Lieutenant Weber reads, "Silence the way other men read charts." He shortens his contacts with BDU to seconds you could count on your knuckles, changes course twice for reasons he cannot hoist into words, and saves his men 3 times by what they will later call luck and he will later call cowardice when no one is listening. Gasket sweat, men's eyes pick up the sullenness of tired battery acid. In the cramped radio shack, the Medoc set mutters a steady nothing. The Americans' 10-centimeter sets are whispers it cannot hear. September finds an odd, calm convoy. Battles fewer. Sinkings down. Rumors thick. On Card's mess deck, the men read clippings that call it a turning point and knock the wood where they sit because sailors hedge their futures with ritual as much as with training. The escort skippers grow fox-like. They talk less on open circuits and write more on slates. One Buckley-class begins to keep her Hedgehog crews at the ready at mealtimes, and the cooks grumble until a contact interrupts stew and proves the new habit right. The doctrine hardens around results. Don't wait to be asked. Comb the approaches to known refuel points. Don't chase every phantom. Box the datum, work the clock, and make the enemy breathe bad air until he chooses visibility over life. If he surfaces, spoil him with shallow set charges and gunfire that hits fittings before flesh. Make dives impossible and escapes confusing. If he stays down, give Fido his problem and let engineering be your ally. The men become believers in a theology of method, bearing, speed, pattern. The ocean remains pagan, but it is starting to respect liturgy. The 8th of October 1943. Tercera, Azores. The first RAF Liberator grinds down a new strip at Lodges, tires smoking the dust of an island that has waited centuries to matter to this war. Ground crews paint numbers on doors that never had numbers, tent lines sprout like a new crop. Within a week, very long-range patrols knit a new layer into the net. The air gap that Wolfpacks once called hunting preserve turns into something smaller than a day's flight. On a gray morning, a Liberator picks up a U-boat wake it would have missed in June, and a day later, Card's group is flying toward the same patch of coordinates, reading a dispatch born in a Lisbon back channel, baptized in London, and sent to sea from Washington. Card's Avengers drop sonobuoys as if sowing a field they intend to harvest by afternoon. In the headsets, prop beats crossing and splitting like braid. 2 contacts, the radioman says. One slower, one approaching. A Type 14 again, with a thirsty consort inbound. Miner borrows the sea's patience and flies the box. Fido goes first, quiet expertise, then rockets, then depth charges, walking a line that makes the tanker's world come apart seam by seam. The consort catches only smoke and men bobbing in a black mirror. She does the arithmetic no captain envies and vanishes under the slick without an acknowledgement of sorrow. On Card's flight deck, a crew chalks a tiny milk cow on the island's snout, horns, an X through the body, then wipes the cartoon off, embarrassed by joy at a job that leaves men floating in cold. They replace it with a small, neat notation that means the same thing and none of the mess. The chaplain says a few words over the rail at dusk. He does not use the word enemy, only mariners. Weber, days later and 100 miles abeam of where he promised to be, hears a rumor come down the ether. A new base in the Azores patrols over places the sea once considered private. He taps his pencil against the chart, creates a dogleg that will cost diesel he cannot afford, and makes it anyway. The navigator raises an eyebrow. Weber shakes his head. "We are not clever," he says. "We are alive." The men nod because the line between those two has become faint. By end October, the kill graphs in Washington's basement climb like hard weather, and in Brittany they slump like wet tents. The laughter that christened baby carriers has gone quiet in the pens. Someone paints out a jeering graffiti on a dock wall because no one finds it funny now. In the North Atlantic, a convoy plows without seeing a periscope, and on Card, the captain studies his fuel tables, calculates the margin between aggression and prudence, and decides on aggression. He signals a night barrier cap, wildcats cutting racetracks over dark water, and the deck gang grins because a carrier, even a small one, is never happier than when she is busy. One midnight in late October, a young helmsman on a destroyer escort leans into a turn that will put his ship athwart a guest track and thinks, absurdly, of the sound of a bicycle chain at home. At the same instant, in a U-boat 50 meters below, a machinist's mate stares at a needle and thinks of a field near keel and the way wheat runs before wind. The ocean is large enough to hold both thoughts. The doctrine makes sure only one of them sees morning. November 1943. North Atlantic, night so thick it seems poured from a drum. A Buckley-class destroyer escort yawns across a heavy sea while deckhands wrestle a crate-stamped FXR. Two men go over the stern with lines at their waists and clip the tow noisemaker in place. The petty officer of the watch gives a thumbs up, and the ship levers ahead, the decoy thrumming like a hive somewhere in her wake. Word rides the circuits that the Germans have loosed a new acoustic torpedo T5 Zonenkönig, the GNAT, a weapon that listens for screws and loves the sound of an escort's propellers. The answer is ugly and effective. Foxtrot divided by FXR, a racket so loud it seduces the torpedo away to chase noise until its battery dies. By the end of September, transatlantic escorts are towing it as doctrine, and the first panic begins to leak out of voices on the bridge. In a Type VII that has learned to distrust the surface, a new Kapitän Leutnant with a familiar surname, Otto Weber, no kin to Ernst, works his problem. He's fitted Naxos, the S-band radar detector meant to catch Allied 10-centimeter sets the old Metox never heard. When it works, it buys a minute, maybe two. When it doesn't, the first notice is the ocean beside you exploding into white and steel. He limits his signals to the shortest bursts and feels every second on the air as if holding a match near powder. The detector's scope winks. Is it warning or weather? No time to argue. Alarm, he says, again. The boat goes under, and the sea becomes a mathematics of depth, battery, and fear. Azores, Lajes, early winter. A Liberator comes in low over Terceira, tires smoking on the new strip. RAF Coastal Command has pushed a pin into the middle of the ocean. The logbook will later record tidy dates and unit numbers, but in the moment it's mud, wind, and the smell of aviation fuel. Within days, VLR patrols are combing where maps once wrote only air gap. On 1 December, British and U.S. reps ink a joint agreement that formalizes the American presence on the field paper catching up with reality. Before the end of the month, Lajes is flinging long-legged eyes over water that used to be private, and hunter-killer groups are being vectored with coordinates pulled from that new horizon. Washington, July into winter. In a room that hums like a ship, 10th Fleet has settled into its hard chair. The wall map is grease-penciled, erased, and drawn again. HF divided by DF Bearings Mary Convoy reports. Weather fronts are treated like enemy officers. The magnetron secret that once belonged to laboratories now breathes through every message. On 20 May, the organization had been born on Ernest King's say-so. By autumn, it is a habit the ocean can feel. A short enemy transmission in the wrong place, and a small carrier group turns like a knife toward a rendezvous that becomes an ambush. Vector card, a clerk writes, and a signal runs to a ship whose screws begin to turn a little faster. USS Card, late November. The deck is wet with old rain. A TBM squats with a Mark 24 under his belly and rockets shouldered under its wings because no single cleverness solves the Atlantic. The crew chief thumps the torpedo's fairing like you'd nudge a dozing dog. The pilot reads checklists aloud, voice flat as ritual. The Avenger goes into the wind and vanishes into an overcast that tastes like iron filings. Up in the wool, the radioman listens for sonobuoys' thin heartbeats and for the big fish's screws slower than a 7. Fatter, a Type 14 tanker, the milch cow the wolves cannot live without. When contact resolves from rumor into shape, the pilot lays the run not onto the target but across its path, and Fido slips into the deep to make a choice no human voice can unmake. Minutes later, The surface lifts in a bruise, and a ship designed to feed war begins to starve it instead. The Germans answer, because of course they do. In December, a destroyer escort in gray water feels the cold grab of a gnat. The helmsman throws the wheel, and the Foxer sings louder, dragging the torpedo off into the noise. While men hold breath they won't admit they were holding. The lesson spreads faster than orders. Tow your decoy. Vary your speed. Do not chase your own wakes into the trap. On a different day, a coastal command crew in a Lee Light Liberator snaps on the sun at 50 feet and catches a conning tower in the act of choosing. Naxos gives warning too late. Tracers walk the bridge. Depth charges take the argument below. You can feel the campaign changing in your bones. Not a single miracle, but a system that keeps functioning while the sea tries to make men small. Bogue's name circulates on mess decks the way old ballads used to. U-118, west of the Canaries, a day when Avengers came out of a blue so bright it hurt and turned a mine layer into a memory. Card's tally climbs, neat and unadorned in the log, and no one carves cartoons into the island anymore because the men don't like to laugh where the work feels like surgery. 10th Fleet's dispatches come with fewer words and cleaner arrows. Somewhere in Lorient, a dock wall that once wore a jeer about baby carriages is repainted a sullen gray. And still, the ocean tries to write its own ending. A night in January brings ice on rails and breath like smoke. Wildcats fly barrier cap in patterns they can now draw with their eyes closed. And somewhere underneath, Otto Weber turns for a dogleg that will cost him diesel he cannot afford, because a rumor about the Azores feels true, and because men who have lived this long learn to spend fuel like prayers. He wonders if the sea will forgive caution. Above him, an Avenger idles in a racetrack, and the pilot checks his fuel and makes the opposite bet. Two doctrines intersect in the dark, one man's instinct and another man's system. By dawn, there is only a slick where a refueler should have been, and scattered heads insisting on the right to breathe. A destroyer escort idles, Foxer still muttering behind her like last night's argument, while sailors pass hot coffee to hands too numb to hold it. In Washington, a pencil draws a line to the next probable rendezvous, and someone who has never smelled the ocean says, "Send Card there." On the small carrier's bridge, the captain flicks a glance at the wind and nods once, because the answer is always the same. Turn into it. The 4th of June, 1944. Off Cape Blanco, French West Africa. Dawn breaks like a knife, scraped along pewter, the swell long and oily under a humid sky. Task Group 22.3 USS Guadalcanal, CVE 60, with destroyer escorts Chatelaine, DE 149, Flaherty, DE 135, Pillsbury, DE 133, Jinx, DE 665, and Pope, DE 134, paces the wind on a box patrol Captain Daniel V. Gallery has flown, sailed, and argued into being. On Guadalcanal's flight deck, FM 2 Wildcats tick and cough to life, while a TBM Avenger waits with depth charges fused shallow and sonobuoys stacked like loaves. Below, in CIC, an HF divided by DF bearing gets married to a sonar sniff from the night watch, and a pencil draws a tight oval that convinces men who trust oceans more than paper. Chatelaine's sonar man, a kid who learned to hear steel through salt calls at first. Underwater contact, range 2,000 yards, angle on the bow read 2-0. The bridge snaps awake as if someone cracked ice in a glass. Full ahead. Make your run. Hedgehog crews bounce to their knees at the forecastle, hands slapping spigot heads in a ritual fast as counting rosary beads. Fire! 24 bomblets skip off the ship like a thrown bouquet and arc into gray air. They land in silence and stay silent. Good. Misses keep the target ignorant. Come around, prepare depth charges. Below, in U-505, Capitaine Lieutenant Harold Longue listens to physics pick a fight with his nerves. The boat has been running deck awash and wary for days. The Bay of Biscay behind him and a rumor of hunters in every compass point. He ordered a crash dive at the first glint of aircraft metal and now rides the uneasy chair where battery, ballast, and fear sit together. The hydrophone sings a jealous song, screws fast, screws slow, screws crossing. Hold 70 meters, Longue says, a hand flat in the air, calm the coin he spins to buy his men silence. Chatelaine turns inside her own wake and drops the first depth charge pattern, as if planting a flag in a place only mathematics can see. The ship shudders, geysers rear and clap their hands back into the sea. A wave of pressure slaps U-505's ribs, and a gasket spits a thin, venomous mist. "Damage aft!" someone yells. "Minor!" the executive officer snaps, willing it true. But a valve has jarred and the boat begins to slide heavy. Up 5, counterflood. The trim becomes a fistfight. The second pattern walks in closer. Each concussion, a door slammed in a small house. A battery cell fractures and throws a chlorine tang into air already old. Lange chooses between poisons. Surface. Now. A black cigar of steel punches up through slop water into a circle of ships that have been waiting to be right. Shatland is already on the gun, 3-inch barking, 40mm sewing tracer through spray. The first bursts strip the deck gun. The second rake the tower. A few Germans try a white cloth, then vanish behind splinters. "Cease fire!" Gallery's voice rides every circuit at once. He wants a live boat. Boats away, boarders assemble. On Guadalcanal, a motor whaleboat slaps down and takes water and men in the same breath. Lieutenant J.G. Albert David goes over the side with a boarding party from Pillsbury. Pistol lanyard slung, demolition kit banging his thigh. The orders are simple and stupid and therefore correct. Keep it from sinking, kill the scuttling, get the papers. He climbs U-505's rounded back, boots slipping on a deck now slick with diesel and the panic of men who want to be water. A demolition charge ticks somewhere he can't see. He drops into the conning tower smoke, sparks, the stink of a wounded machine, then down the ladder into a world of pipes and green light. "Seacocks," he shouts, because language is a tool. The compartment answers with the clatter of wrenches and foreigners' ghosts. He finds the main flood handle and throws his weight, the metal fighting like an animal. It gives with a cry that is almost human. Another man, face a smear of sweat and soot, shoulders into a second valve. The list eases one hair. A charge goes off, forward small, petulant. The boat shudders but holds. David pushes past a table bolted to the deck and rips at a canvas bag. Papers cluck out grid tables, Kursignal sheets, an Enigma rotor glinting like someone's toy in hell's light. "Bundle it," he barks, and men who haven't breathed since the whaleboat left the carrier start breathing again. Above, Guadalcanal slows and eases a tow line across a wet void with the delicacy of a surgeon passing a needle. The escorts circle with guns down and eyes up, because you don't waste prisoners for paperwork. Sailors haul men out of a black mirror that smells like victory and oil. Lines come taut. U-505 holes corked and valves turned against death for the moment, lurches into a grudging obedience. Gallery's idea, mad in a wardroom, improbable in a memo, has become a cable biting into a captured spine. Lange is in the water with his crew, face pale, under Diesel's slick makeup. He can hear 2 languages on the wind, one angry and one practical. When a sailor drags him into a boat, he feels the bones of the man's hand through the glove and knows, as surely as he knows the weight of his hat, that the war has changed shape again. He watches, stunned to silence, while a small carrier takes his submarine in tow and points her bow not for shore but for distance, a secret to be stored far from every camera. All day and into evening the tow holds, then parts, then holds again. Wildcats circle like shepherd dogs. The boarding party goes back twice to silence treacherous dribbles and make a dead boat pretend at life. By nightfall, U-505 rides sullen behind Guadalcanal, a fish leashed to a ship that was designed to chase fish. On the little carrier's island, a chalk mark appears, no cartoon, just a neat U-505 and a thin line beneath, because boats would taste wrong on this deck. In the days to come, the convoy lanes in the North Atlantic will fill a vacancy they cannot name. In Lorient and Street Nazaire, a few signals do not arrive, and a few men stop whistling. In Washington, the secrecy wraps like canvas around a body, no press, no parades, not yet. In a wardroom at sea, Gallery writes up Lieutenant David for a medal because heroism that looks like plumbing deserves the same ink as heroism that looks like fireworks. In the system HF divided by DF needles, sonobuoys' whispered truths, Foxers muttering in the wake, Avengers slinging patient torpedoes, a carrier captain willing to risk everything for a prize has done more than kill. It has captured the very thing that came to kill it. November 1944, North Atlantic, a night blown flat by sleet. USS Croatan, CVE 25, shoulders into a gale, wind line hissing across the flight deck as if trying to peel it off like a label. Her escorts, Janrit, Tucson, Frost, Inch, Hughes tow Foxers that grumble in the wake like chained, angry dogs. In CIC, the ocean has been redrawn as bearing lines and time hacks. A watch officer writes, "Snort," in the corner of a grease-penciled plot, the question mark bigger than the word. A TBM Avenger claws into the headwind because a small carrier's only luxury is stubbornness. Under the belly rides a Mark 24. On the wings, depth charges and stubby rockets. The pilot, Lieutenant. Eddie Carraway flies by instruments so sensitive his breath seems like weather. In back, the radioman warms his hands over the glow of the ASV set and listens to sonobuoy chatter that sounds like rain learning grammar. Below, Kapitänleutnant Otto Weber lives inside a pipe. The Schnorchel's head pops and ducks with the swell, letting diesels gulp and cough, exhaling a line of exhaust so thin it should be a secret. Except nothing is secret at 50 feet in winter. The boat has learned to hate CO, 2 headaches, and oil-thick air. Men work with the slack, irritable silence of those who have traded comfort for survival so long they can no longer remember the difference. Naxos pips occasionally. Is it warning or sea noise wearing a mask? Weber shortens transmissions to a stutter's blink, alters course 2 points, and chooses to believe in 10 gods and sticky valves. On Croaton's forward screen, Frost sonar takes hold of something too disciplined to be weather. Contact, bearing green 2 to 5, range 800. Hedgehog crews snap in like bone setting. The captain rides the helm over his own wake, keeping the turn quiet to deny the enemy a rhythm to hear. Fire on the roll. 24 bomblets arc, land, and wait to earn a voice. Nothing. A miss, and therefore a kindness, because quiet keeps the target guessing. Carraway drops a picket of sonobuoys like breadcrumbs across a guest path. In the headphones, wave slap and porpoises, and then slower, deeper machinery that is pretending to be careful. There, the radio man says, pointing at nothing anyone else can see. The Avenger angles to cross the sound, not chase it. Fido falls into the dark and becomes, as always, the most patient crewman aboard. Weber feels the boat's pitch in his front teeth and hears, or thinks he hears, a new fox-clever buzzing that threads around the Schnorchel's cough. Decoy, he orders, and a bold canister blooms behind like a lie that smells right. Reduce speed. Trim for 9 meters. Silent running. The helmsman obeys, the diesels throttle to a sulky mutter, and the boat becomes a reluctant fish. For 3 heartbeats, the captain believes he has thrown the dog off the scent. Then the hull trembles with a touch, not a hammer, more like a hand closing, and the concussion rolls the air into a bruise. On Frost's plot, the screw beat stutters, accelerates, then falls. Possible damage. Mark datum. The captain holds charges shallow to punish a surface attempt. On the Avenger, Carraway circles and watches a stain of diesel unspool where the sea pretends to be seamless. He does not cheer. He calls it in calm, because the ocean punishes celebration with the same efficiency it punishes error. Dawn limps up gray. The escorts box the slick. One foxer's bitter rattle drags a late, wandering gnat off on a fool's errand. Hughes makes a second Hedgehog run and earns 3 small, separate, almost intimate detonations, the sound of contact, not concussion. A shoal of bubbles lifts like a quilt, a plank, a cap, the smell of hot iron cooling in too much cold. Boats away, Croatan signals, and sailors bend to the old decent work of rescue. Blankets, cigarettes, coffee. A prisoner stares up at the little carrier and says nothing because there is a limit to what a man can name out loud. Winter keeps coming. December throws ice onto railings and into lungs. Decks are salted with sand and cursing. Wildcats fly barrier cap in circuits they could trace with eyes closed if eyes would stay open in this wind. In CIC, the doctrine has shed romance and become metabolism. Box the datum. Rotate sonobuoy patterns. Foxer always streaming. Never sprint in a straight line. Patience is a weapon. The men start to understand that an air gap is not a place on a map, but a rhythm, and the hunter-killer group's job is to ruin rhythm. Weber survives the December hurt by turning coward into craft. He draws dog legs that cost too much fuel and makes them anyway. He orders a full stop under a weather front because silence is sometimes more movement than motion. He saves his men twice with decisions he will not be able to defend in a report. He also buries a machinist's mate who breathes too much bad air, 1 watch too long. The funeral as quiet as guilt. January 1945. A rumor rides the ether. V. Weapons from subs, maybe rockets, maybe hysteria, operation, something. The name not yet fixed. Eastbound convoys tighten, West Atlantic Patrol Line's Knitdenzer. Somewhere off the Grand Banks, Croaton's group runs through a night where the stars are knives, and an Avenger flicks on a flare that makes a Schnorchel's head wink once like a blinking eye. A Hedgehog pattern lands true. One bomb meets steel, the rest are moot. Foxers grumble. Sonobuoys gossip. The system does not blink. At sea level, none of it feels like victory. It feels like procedure repeated until fear tires. But in Lorient and Street, Nazaire, laughter has gone out of style. In a bunker near Plone, men speak in futures that refuse to hold still. On Croton's mess deck, someone chalks baby carriers, one on a bulkhead and then rubs it away. Embarrassed, they have learned that the ocean tallies pride with interest. The 4th of May, 1945. Norwegian Sea, dirty daylight and snow in the air like cigarette ash. A message, Kerr's signal short, plain, unbelievable crackles through the damp inside every Allied radio shroud. U-boats to surface, fly black flags, proceed to designated ports, cease all offensive action. Gross Admiral Dönitz's voice isn't in it, but his handwriting is. On the bridge of USS Bogue, a quartermaster copies the signal twice, then once more because hands have a way of doubting ears. An FM2 circles at 2,000 feet, the pilot watching the sea like a man comparing memories. This water once belonged to periscopes. Now, dots. 1, 2, 3, small, dark, moving too regularly to be drift. He drops to 800, crosses their wakes, and sees them for what they are. U-boats under power, decks manned, white cloths lashed to stubs of masts, black surrender flags flapping so hard they look like fists opening and closing. He clicks his mic once, cannot find the word, and settles for the work. Multiple submarines on the surface. Bearing 180 from Bogue, range 5 miles. Surrender signals observed. On deck, Foxers are hauled in and left to drip like tired fish. Hedgehog crews stack their rounds and cover the spigots with canvas. The captain stands with binoculars tucked into his chest, as if bracing them against a heartbeat he does not entirely trust. Signals issue course and speed. Stand by boarding parties. His voice is level. Level voices have gotten them this far. The first U-boat eases alongside a destroyer escort with the careful obedience of a dog that has forgotten how to be mean. Men stare across a few feet of gray water as if visiting the other's house through an open window. Knives, pistols, the hardware of reflex surrendered into bags that look like grocery sacks. A young German officer, his cap tucked under his arm, reads an English language card aloud in a dry accent and does not lift his eyes when he says the word unconditional. On the escort's deck, an American boatswain says, "I." Out of habit, it is the Navy's word for everything, and only later thinks about what that acquiescence means. Bogue keeps way on, not toward a target, but toward a vector of obligation. The carrier smells of old cordite and new coffee and winter's last teeth. In the ready room, a pilot picks up a greased pencil and writes nothing on the board because there is no word for today's brief. The chaplain is asked to say something. He says less than anyone expects and more than anyone will admit they need it. Mariners, he begins, as he did after kills and rescues, because the word fits the day better than any other. In a barracks camp far inland, U-505's captured men hear the news in the strange grammar of a guard who does not want to gloat. One of them remembers diesel smoke on a June morning and the way a little carrier dragged his steel house backward over an Atlantic that suddenly had more than one author. He asks, in decent American, what happens to the boat? The guard shrugs and says the only honest thing, she's a secret, and then, I guess, a museum. The prisoner nods once, a ritual of closure 1,000 miles from the sea. Across the gray miles, a few commanders ignore the order, or hear it too late, or choose scuttling as a last. Sour theology. Black flags vanish, and black water closes over steel. An Avenger circles one such patch, low, and the crew says nothing into the intercom because what can be said about men who did what their hands were trained to do until the last second they could do it? On Bogue's Island, somebody has kept a list, neat as procurement. Names of U-boats, coordinates, weather, notches without boasting. A petty officer adds a line that isn't a kill and feels the novelty of that act slide under his skin like heat. Below, the engines that have measured out 2 years of doctrine and weather keep turning because stopping is a decision for harbors and ceremonies. Evening. The ocean puts on its best suit, slate with a silver at the helm. The flight deck finally goes quiet enough that a man can hear his own clothes. Caraway, transferred from Croatan, faces change while Doctrines remain, stands at the bow, and feels the deck's residual warmth through his boots. He thinks about Fido's patient heartbeat, about Hedgehog detonations that sounded like someone knocking in the next room, about Foxer's buzzing like wasps tied to a nail. He thinks unexpectedly about the first time he saw a Jeep carrier, how small it looked against the idea of an ocean. He smiles because now he knows the trick, not size, but system. Not menace, but method. Somewhere in a damp concrete room where maps have been taken down and hung the other way, a staff officer files a memorandum. Escort carrier groups effective in closing mid-ocean gap. Maintain post-war ASW development. It is prose without music. It is also how wars stop happening to the same people in the same ways. Night. Bogue makes turns for a rendezvous with a name that means home. The black flags on the horizon are swallowed by a weather front and then by the fact of peace. On the little carrier's fantail, a sailor flicks his cigarette into the Atlantic and watches the ember spiral out, a small star deciding to be dark. He says to no one, "They laughed at us." Then he adds, "Because ritual has earned the right to be a benediction, not anymore."